Fighting continues in the Middle East, with Iran launching a new wave of attacks as Israel hits targets in Lebanon. Now, for more on this, we head over to Washington, where we're joined by our correspondent, Reggie Cecchini. So, Reggie, we have entered now into the sixth day of this war. What's the latest?
Well, Miranda, we are getting a better idea from both the United States and from Israel precisely what is being struck in Iran. And according to the Israeli military, in this latest round of strikes that began, this would be the 11th round of strikes, we know that they are going after underground missile storage and missile launchers around the country. Well, the United States, according to the Pentagon briefing on Wednesday, says that it is now ending its broad campaign and is now going after a far more targeted strike throughout the country. We've also been given an update that from Iranian officials that the death toll in the country now sits at 1,100 as Iran itself continues to fire missiles around the region through the Gulf nations. But also this morning, there is reports that an Iranian drone struck the airport in Azerbaijan along with a government building, opening up a new front in this war and creating, a new threat with Azerbaijani officials suggesting that they will respond to this incident. Iran, however, is denying one of its drones hit the region. We should also point out that in the Strait of Hormuz, we have heard from the IGRC that they intend to target, Miranda, vessels from America, from Israel, and from allies of both countries. That could put direct targets on more shipping vessels, particularly linked to oil, that could drive the price of oil up and further put more pressure from the United States and Israel on Iran, especially if this gets in the way of global oil shipping.
All right, so we know the conflict continues to expand. Reggie, there are thousands of Canadians, thousands of Americans who live in the Middle East. Bring us up to speed on evacuation plans to get foreign citizens out of the region.
Right, and we heard from Canadian officials yesterday that charter flights are being booked and that Canadians have been in contact with Canadian officials to try and get out of the region. This joins in the efforts that we are seeing from many nations, including the Czech Republic and the UK and Italy, to try and get their citizens out, along with the United States, except there is criticism being put on the State Department for having acted pretty late in the game. We saw a statement put out from Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Wednesday telling Americans that there's a certain site that they need to register at in order to get some assistance. But again, this comes, 5+ days into this war, and we know that tens of thousands of military and government personnel had been moved out of the region, leaving civilians behind. And with so many, pieces of airspace that are closed or intermittent closures of airports, it is much more difficult for people to try and find ways out. Then there are countries from much further away from, like Japan, which is simply telling its citizens in the area to shelter in place. So it is a scramble again for these foreign citizens and for these foreign nations to try and get their people out, especially with the situation as tense as it is.
All right, now, Reggie, this is still a war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran, but some Western leaders are now saying they're ready to assist.
Yeah, they are. We heard from the Italian Prime Minister on Italian radio on Thursday saying that her country will send air defenses to Gulf nations, not only because they are allies, but because there are Italian citizens that live in the area. We've also heard this from the United Kingdom, from France, from Germany. We've also heard that, there's a potential here that Canada may need to get involved in some way, according to Prime Minister Mark Carney. And interestingly enough, we've also heard from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying that he will send people into these Gulf nations to try and help deal with the drone attacks, because many of the incidents that we've seen taking place, particularly when it comes to U.S. air bases, they're being hit by the Iranian Shahad drones, and those are the same drones that Iran is supplying to Russia, that Russia is then using to carry out strikes in Ukraine. So one country that's actively under threat and still at war is now sending people to a region that is under a new war to try and give them some best insights on how to push back against these drones.
And Reggie, there has been a lot of questions about the legality, about the legitimacy of this war, but in Washington it does seem Republicans are not going to stand in the way of Donald Trump's use of war powers.
That's correct. At the Senate on Wednesday, Republicans and one Democrat, John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, they decided to not put a check on Donald Trump's use of war powers, suggesting that this is something that is in the purview of Donald Trump, and he is legally allowed to go forward with this. Also worth pointing out, most senators are not calling this a war. They're simply saying that this is an operation, saying that Donald Trump hasn't declared war, even though Donald Trump and most members of the administration are saying war. The House on Thursday is also going to try to move forward with a vote to put Trump's war powers in check. Again, it is not clear if Republicans are going to side with Democrats in this effort, but it is worth pointing out that this is a move that is forcing lawmakers to go on the record, and it's also worth remembering this is an election year, and there are growing numbers of Americans, according to polling, that do not see these strikes in Iran as in America's best interest. So this could become problematic politically for Republicans who are on the record saying that they're okay with these strikes, especially if they're up for election in November.
All right, we'll continue to cover it very closely. Reggie, as always, thank you so much for the update. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cecchini.